You ever get that feeling like you're always available for everyone, all the time, and yet somehow no one's really there for you? Like people can call you at 2 a.m., dump their problems on you, ask for favors, lean on your energy, but the second you need space, quiet, or a damn break, it's a problem. We're going to talk about that, but not in some fluffy set boundaries way. I'm talking about the real power that comes when you stop being emotionally available on demand. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how and why pulling back isn't weakness. It's actually one of the strongest, smartest things you'll ever do. So if you've ever felt drained, used, or stuck in the cycle of pleasing everyone but yourself, stay right here. This might just shift something in you. Let's start with the thing no one really tells you. That being constantly available doesn't make you kind, or noble, or even reliable. It just makes you exhausted. Not just physically tired, but energetically, psychologically, spiritually drained in a way that's hard to explain to people who've never lived it. You end up running on fumes and calling it being there for others. And eventually you start confusing your value with your accessibility. That's not connection. That's a slow bleed. And the worst part? It's invisible. You don't notice it at first. It just creeps in quietly every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you reply to a message when your mind is begging for silence. Every time you show up out of guilt rather than love. Carl Jung had a name for what's being depleted here. Psychic energy. According to Jung, our mind operates like an energy system. Every interaction, every thought, every decision takes up a portion of that inner fuel. So when you're constantly responding, reacting, fixing, explaining, you're not just helping others, you're hemorrhaging your own energy. And no one teaches us how to protect that. Instead, we're conditioned to associate goodness with self-sacrifice. To believe that being emotionally present 24/7 is what makes us decent people. But let me ask you, what's the cost of that belief? What's the toll of giving pieces of yourself away every day, hoping someone will eventually give you the same in return? Most people don't even realize this exchange is happening. You keep showing up for others while quietly disappearing from yourself. And over time, that becomes your identity. The fixer, the comforter, the one who always has time. It sounds generous, but it's actually dangerous. Because the more you give without boundaries, the more people expect. You become the emotional equivalent of a vending machine. Insert crisis, receive validation. Insert guilt, receive comfort. And if you ever stop, suddenly you're distant, selfish, cold. But the truth is, you're not cold. You're tired. You're just finally noticing that your energy is finite and you've been giving it away like it grows on trees. Even neuroscience backs this up. Our brains are hardwired to chase dopamine, the chemical that makes us feel rewarded. Every time we say yes, reply quickly, or get someone's gratitude, we get a little hit. It feels good, until it doesn't. Because when that reward becomes expected instead of appreciated, the dopamine fades, and all you're left with is obligation. That's where burnout lives. In that quiet space between what you give and what you actually have left. So if this feels familiar, if you've been wondering why you're so tired, why nothing seems to recharge you, it's not that you're broken. It's that you're too accessible. Your energy is leaking in 100 different directions, and none of them lead back to you. This isn't about turning your back on people. It's about turning your face toward yourself. Because until you do, no one else will. Now here's where things start to get real. Because the more available you are, the more predictable you become. And predictability, when it comes to your emotional presence, is a trap. At first, it seems harmless. You're just being consistent, right? People know they can count on you. But over time, that consistency turns into something else entirely. You become the person everyone leans on, not because they care, but because they know you won't say no. You become less of a person and more of a function, someone's therapist, someone's venting station, someone's quick fix. And here's the truth people don't like to admit. When something or someone is always there, we stop valuing it. It's human nature. We respect what we have to earn. But the minute you're always accessible, you lose that edge. You stop being respected and start being used, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes very deliberately. This is where emotional manipulation creeps in, not with shouting or drama, but with subtle expectations. You're expected to reply quickly, expected to understand, expected to never pull away. And when you finally do, suddenly you're the problem. You've changed, you're being weird or off. But what's really happening is you've stopped being useful. And for people who only saw you through the lens of what you gave them, that's a threat. That's when the accusations and guilt tripping start. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you're disrupting their comfort. You've stopped being their emotional emergency button. You've taken away their ability to press a button and get instant access to your energy. This is the part Jung understood deeply. He talked about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by others. Over time, that mask becomes automatic. You say you're fine when you're breaking down. You explain yourself even when you owe no one anything. You keep showing up in ways that feel safe and expected until they start to feel suffocating. Because behind that mask is someone who's tired of always being the strong one. Someone who wants to be seen, not just used. And this is where the shift has to happen. You've got to recognize that your predictability, your constant yes, your immediate replies, your emotional availability on demand, is not making you more loved. It's making you more replaceable. People don't cling to things they think will always be there. They take them for granted. And that's exactly what happens when you don't set limits. You stop being a person with needs, feelings, and depth, and start being a tool, a convenience. And you deserve better than that. You deserve to be seen not just as someone who's always helpful, but as someone with value beyond their function. But that doesn't happen until you break the pattern, until you stop showing up exactly how people expect. Because unpredictability in this context is power. It disrupts the narrative others have written for you. It forces them to look closer or walk away. Either way, you win. Because the ones who stay when you're no longer always available, those are the ones who truly see you. And this is where things start to shift. Not just outwardly, but within you. Because once you break the pattern of constant availability, something powerful starts to take its place. Silence. Not the awkward passive kind that comes from shutting down, but the intentional kind. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words ever could. Silence, when chosen deliberately, doesn't say, "I'm afraid to speak." It says, "I don't owe you a performance." Most of us have been trained to believe that silence is weakness. That if you don't respond, if you don't defend yourself, if you don't explain your absence, you've lost. But that's not true. In fact, in many cases, silence is the ultimate disruptor. It throws people off because it removes their control. They can't argue with silence. They can't twist it. They can't manipulate it into something else. When you don't react, they have to sit with their own emotions, and a lot of people can't handle that. They're used to provoking you just enough to get a spark, a word, a breakdown. That's how they keep the game going. But when you go quiet, truly quiet, it breaks the loop. That friend who only shows up in a crisis, waiting for you to drop everything, suddenly unsure if you'll even pick up the phone. That ex who knew exactly what to say to get under your skin, powerless. Because when you remove your reaction, you remove their script. Jung believed that the process of individuation, becoming a fully developed whole person, requires distance from others' projections. Silence is one of the cleanest ways to create that distance. It's the space where clarity grows, where you begin to see patterns you couldn't see before. You notice who reaches out just to feel seen, who provokes you because they can't deal with their own chaos, who only values you when you're emotionally available to them. And that's the thing. Silence exposes motives. It reveals truths no conversation ever could. On a scientific level, silence does something else too. It breaks the cycle of emotional contagion. Our brains are wired with mirror neurons. When someone is angry or panicking or needy, your nervous system picks that up and starts to sync with it. That's why drama drains you so fast. But when you don't engage, when you hold still, those neurons don't fire the same way. You stay centered, you conserve your energy, and you send a clear, quiet signal. I'm not here to play that role anymore. Now, this isn't easy, especially at first. Silence can feel like you're being rude or distant. It triggers guilt, especially if you've been trained to soothe others at your own expense. But over time, you realize it's not cruelty, it's control. Not over others, but over yourself. Because there's real strength in saying nothing when everything in you wants to explain, justify, or defend. There's real power in choosing not to be baited. And when people don't know how to deal with that silence, that's not your problem. That's their discomfort meeting your boundaries. Let it happen, because silence doesn't just protect your energy, it amplifies your presence. You stop being noise in someone else's story and start becoming the one thing they can't control. And in a world that thrives on reaction, that kind of stillness, that's a weapon. Eventually, once you've stopped reacting, once you've chosen silence and made space between yourself and all those old roles you used to perform, you're going to find yourself somewhere completely unfamiliar. Alone. Not just physically alone, but emotionally and mentally detached from the noise you used to call connection. And that's where the real transformation begins. Because this kind of solitude isn't emptiness. It's the beginning of clarity. It's what Jung referred to as sacred isolation, and it's necessary. It's the phase where you stop outsourcing your worth to other people's attention, where you start hearing your own voice, unfiltered, unedited, uninterrupted. And at first it's strange. That silence you fought so hard to achieve, it starts echoing. You might feel like you've gone too far, like you've lost people, and maybe you have. But here's the thing. What you're losing is the version of yourself that was built to keep others comfortable. And what's replacing it is something stronger. When you enter this kind of solitude, you're not escaping the world. You're returning to yourself. You're no longer constantly available, constantly explainable, constantly open for emotional business. You've stepped off the stage, and the ones who only came to see the show, they leave. Let them, because this is the part where you start to rebuild. Not for performance, not for approval, but for peace. You begin noticing how much lighter you feel when you don't have to respond right away. You start to feel safe in your own energy. You enjoy the quiet instead of fearing it. That's not isolation, that's presence. That's self-trust. And in this presence, you gain something priceless, sovereignty over your attention. You start being selective, not out of bitterness, but out of value. You realize that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your time, your emotional bandwidth. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. And as that shift takes hold, something beautiful happens. The relationships that were built on guilt, manipulation, and expectation, they begin to fall away. The ones that were built on mutual respect, honesty, and stillness, they grow stronger. You stop needing to be understood all the time. You stop fearing rejection. You stop apologizing for your absence, because you're no longer absent from yourself. That's what individuation really is. It's the moment you stop existing to serve others' narratives and start living according to your own. You're no longer defined by your reactions, by how quickly you reply, by how well you play the role. You're defined by your presence, your stillness, your choice. And yeah, some people will hate that. They'll accuse you of being distant, cold, selfish, but what they're really saying is, I can't use you like I used to. And that's not your burden to carry, because the ones who truly value you, they'll stay. They'll meet you in that silence. They'll respect the boundaries you've built. And the rest, they'll drift. That's not loss, that's liberation. Because when you become unavailable for dysfunction, for chaos, for performance, you become available for truth, for peace, for depth. You become whole. Not because someone gave you permission to, but because you finally gave it to yourself. And that wholeness, that's where freedom lives. So here we are, on the other side of it. If you've made it this far, that probably means something inside you resonated. Maybe you're tired of being on call for everyone else's emotions. Maybe you're starting to feel the weight of all the energy you've given away, day after day, year after year. Or maybe you're just finally ready to stop playing a role that never really fit you. Whatever brought you here, let this be the moment you stop apologizing for choosing yourself. Because at the end of the day, your peace, your energy, your presence, those things aren't unlimited. They're precious. And anyone who expects unlimited access to them doesn't really value them in the first place. You don't owe people your explanation. You don't owe them your constant yes. And you definitely do not owe them your exhaustion. What you do owe, though, what you deserve, is the right to be whole without performing, loved without proving, and respected, even in your silence. So if any part of this message hit you in the chest, if it felt like something you've been needing to hear for a long time, then do one thing today that honors that. Maybe it's saying no to something that drains you. Maybe it's taking 5 minutes to just be quiet with yourself. Maybe it's unsubscribing from someone's chaos, emotionally or otherwise. And if you're feeling bold, drop a comment below that simply says, "I choose my peace." Let's see how many of us are walking this path together. Hit that subscribe button, stick around. This journey, it's not about disappearing from the world. It's about finally showing up as you. Thank you for watching.